I'm Dan Rose, this is Matthew Reitzel, and we kind of like to refer to ourselves as the Collections Cape Crusaders. We often go out and help other organizations with their taking care of their collections, and we also go out and meet with a lot of donors quite often. So yes, that's what we fancy ourselves as. The only question is which one's Batman and which one's Robin. I'm thinking that Matthew is Robin because it's got the R on the chest, and I got the big ears, big pointy ears like Batman does. But yeah, that's a debate for another day. So as you know, we are in South Dakota Cultural Heritage Center. This is the headquarters of the State Historical Society. The building was built in 1989 and houses 4 of the 5 departments of the Society: the State Archives, the Museum, Research and Publishing, and State Historic Preservation Office. And then we have an archaeology department in Rapid City. The Society began in 1901. The first director was State Historian Dona Robinson. Since then, we have only had 8 directors, and we happen to have our current director in the room today. I think that says something about the organization, that through its 110 years of existence, we've only had 8 directors, so it's a pretty stable and pretty good organization. Contributions to the state. For us, he was the one that kind of saved the Verendrye plate, which is one of our marquee pieces. That was collected in 1913. It was discovered over in Fort Pierre by 3 teenagers frolicking on the hillside. And it was also his idea to create a tribute to the great men of this country, and that came about as Mount Rushmore. So I'm going to hand it over to Matthew now, and he's going to give you a little spiel about the State Archives.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it when warm bodies show up to our events. So thank you very much for doing that. So this is our main research area here. If any of you ever come to the archives, we're open Monday through Friday and the first Saturday of every month from 9 to 4:30. And this is the general area where people come and do their research. We have a few different items starting here in the library. We have different general reference kind of books for towns, county histories, atlases, general reference photographs. The other thing we also have in our library is different genealogy books for other states. So if you're doing your family history and you found your ancestors came from Massachusetts or New York, we have other volumes in back, and you can trace your history a little bit farther than that. This is our main storage area. A lot of people don't get to see back here. If you ever have some time and you want to take a tour, we can certainly show you around. I showed my mom this once, and she said this always reminds her of Indiana Jones at the end when they're pulling the cart through and there's boxes all over the place. That's kind of what I reminded her of. Along with the archives here in Pierre, we also have our microfilm unit down at the Mike Durfee Prison in Springfield, and they do all the current microfilming of daily and weekly newspapers that end up here at the archives. So I'm just going to go through here quick and do some of our recent donations that the archives has received this past year in 2011. Before I start, on each text up here on the introduction, it has this numbering system up here, which it has the H2011-001. This is kind of the numbering system we have in the archives, and Dan has something similar with the museum collections. At the State Archives, we have both government and manuscript collections. The H in front of the number tells you that it's the manuscript, and that's what I deal with, and that's what we're talking about here today. And then the year explains the year it came in, and then the numbering is in which sequence it was accessioned into the archive. So this is the first one. This is a booklet entitled Soldiers and Civvies, a Manual of Information for Civilian Personnel on the Sioux Falls Army Airfield in Sioux Falls. This was during World War II, circa 1943. This was the booklet that the people working at the airfield would get, and it would have, it lists various rules and regulations, salary policy, the absence of leave policy, duty hours, base operations, different information like that that describes what's going on at the airfield. The Oahe Dam collection, this was a collection of 53 images that we received. Most of them are dated from 1955 to 1961, and it's just general construction scenes of the Oahe Dam. I love all these trucks all in a row here in a line, and I'm sure it goes on farther than that. But this is one of the digging machines. It was called the mole, and it's going into the tunnel. You can see the front head of it, how it spins around, and it's getting all the dirt out. And this is an aerial view here. We're looking south. Pier is in the far background there. You can just barely see the cap. You can also see the airport here. A lot of early construction of the dam. This is the closing operations in August of 1958. And the stilling basin, which everyone has seen enough pictures of the stilling basin recently to last a lifetime. But this is some of the first water going through the dam. Pier and Fort Pier flood images. As Kate said, I've been here 7 years, and at least every year there's a collection of Fort Pier flood images. The one thing I guess that I would just like to remind you and have people keep in mind is a lot of times people have a collection and they think, oh, you know, the archives doesn't need it, or we have plenty of that, you know, they wouldn't want it. This collection in particular, there was only 16 8x10 images, but none of them were images that we have in our collections. So they're all brand new to us. This is again from 52, showing both Pier and Fort Pier. And like I said, they weren't the postcard type images. They were taken by somebody. And it shows the National Guard duck here. And like I said, we have photos of those, but this is more of a close-up view. And this is a view from the viaduct looking down Pier Street. The next collection is the Reverend H.J. Lonker collection. This included 90 lantern slides from Reverend Lonker, who was a Methodist minister in the Crandon, South Dakota area. That's around Spake County. With these, we received them because the donor had seen them at an auction and they purchased them. And then they got a hold of us and said, "Would we want them?" And then they donated them to us. So we were very grateful for them for thinking of us and for picking them up before they ended up in a trash bin. This is the old courthouse in Spake County. And this is the new one, which still exists today if you're ever in Redfield. This is an old WNAX gas station in Brookings. And I don't know if you can see it too far back, but there's a little kid in the door right here, kind of looking out, wondering what's going on there. And then this is a sod house ruin near Woonsock in the 1930s. If you look inside, you can kind of see the whitewash that was on the building. And then it kind of curves here on the corners. My thinking is it's probably used by cattle to rub against. When they're circling around, you can see some of the cow pies and stuff there too. But some of the ruins of the building. And this is an interior view. It's hard to see, but it's an interior view of the church in Crandon. You can see the altar. There's a Christmas tree there on the right. You can see the different pews and chairs that are inside the church. The one thing that interests me about this is the lantern slides are about this big, and they're made of glass. It's 2 pieces of glass with the photo emulsion on the inside, and they put it into this big, you know, heavy, hot machinery thing to shoot it up on the wall. It's loud and noisy, and then you move forward to the 35mm slides, which are about that size, and they would get shot up on the wall. And now we have this digital version, but it's of the old lantern slide. So it's the same kind of thing that you get at the end, but it's a different process altogether. St. Elizabeth's Episcopal Mission Church. This is a catechism booklet. It has 37 questions for the catechumens, and on the left it has it all in English, and in the right it has it in the native language, so you can kind of see how they're trying to teach Native Americans at the mission. And along with this catechism, we also got a hymnal and a prayer book, and it was from one of the students who had been at the Episcopal Mission, and that's in Wapala. The Belle Fourche or Ormond Dam collection. This was over 100 photographs we received of the construction of the dam, generally from 1906 to 1911. When it was completed, it was over 6,262 feet long and 122 feet high, and at the time it was the largest earthen dam in the world when it was completed. And these are some of the construction images. You can see the concrete blocks they're laying down. This is actually the process of how they're making the blocks. You can see the wooden forms, the wagon has the cement and dumps it in, and that's how they're working on that. And then whenever you're building something big, you got to get a bunch of guys who go and get their picture taken and stand on top of stuff, and that's just kind of required. This was a small collection of photos we received when then Vice President George Bush was speaking at the state capitol in January of 1988. What I really liked about these photos is, if you look down here, they got the bomb-sniffing dog going around before the Vice President came out. The Igloo magazines, we got 17 issues of these. These were made by the Black Hills Ordnance Depot Civic Association in Provo, South Dakota. Again, this is during World War II. And they run from January of 44 to May of 44. And within these magazines, it lists recreational activities, different clubs, personnel, both incoming and outgoing from the Ordnance Depot, school news, sports, church service information, and other community life. So it's really a good insight into what's going on at this base as people are coming in and out. Scotty Phillips Memorial Trail Ride, this was a map from July of last year of the trail ride, and it just shows the different stops. And the point I want to bring about this is, Dan and I, we don't have a certain time period where we say we'll only collect things if they're from 1970 and backwards. You know, there's a lot of history going on all around us, so we're always kind of mindful of different things that happened recently that we can add to our collections. These next two collections here, they're two separate collections. The one was from it's the Minetta Holden collection, and Mrs. Holden is here on the left, and then the other collection is the Jane Bing collection, and Mrs. Bing is on the right. These were both World War II nurses, both from South Dakota. Ms. Holden on the left, most of hers were photographs with a few letters, but a nurse in the Pacific Theater of Operation, and Mrs. Bing was in the European Theater of Operations. So they're both from South Dakota, but you have someone going one way and someone going another. And we have both photos and letters from both of them. Ms. Holden was from Irwin, South Dakota, in Brookings County, and Mrs. Bing was from Aberdeen. The Henry and Jenny Smith collection, these were photographs of smaller panoramic photos. The donor called me up one day and she said she had a scrap of panoramic photos. And my idea of panoramic photos, you know, they would be this big and like 3 or 4 feet across. And I was thinking, how is that a scrapbook? How can you put that in there? But they're smaller. They are panoramic, but they're maybe only about that big. They're taken in Charles Mix County from 19-teens to 1930s. On top here is the construction of a bridge across the Missouri River. On the bottom, you can see this house is kind of missing some of its side. It was a tornado in 1920 that damaged some of the house. And then, along with just being in Charles Mix County, there's also other images throughout the state. This is a picture of the state capitol, and this is the picture without the annex in the back. So this is how the capitol used to look before they put the annex on. And then on the bottom is just a steamboat, the Fawn. Osborne Hardware Records. This was a hardware store in Phillips, South Dakota. Paul Osborne managed the store from 1943 to 1973. A lot of the collection itself was in the last 5 or so years that he owned the company, but it included supply invoices and inventory lists. This is one of them here, and this is from 1969, but it's listing all the different type of material they had at this hardware store, what they were selling, what they had, how much it's worth. It has men's golf set, a girl's bike, horseshoes, air rifle, ice chest, all different kinds of things. So you can kind of get a picture of what's being sold in Phillips, South Dakota at that time period. And the girl's bike, I have a 6-year-old who's going to be 7 here, but the girl's bike is more expensive than the men's golf clubs. I don't think that's the case now anymore today. The Joe and Winston Hall collection, they were both weather reporters in Mobridge, South Dakota. We have the records every day of what the weather was in Mobridge, South Dakota from 1926 to 1983. This was a collection we just got in this year, so it's over 40 years worth of weather data that they collected. Before they had the good folks at Kettleland TV and Live Doppler and all that stuff, they had people throughout the state of South Dakota compiling all these different records. This is for March of 1930. It has the temperature, the high, the low, precipitation, the wind, where the wind came out of, and then on the far right, all those different symbols of there's an index, the circle with the cross meaning one thing, weather-wise. Another thing that we receive here at the archives, along with more individual kind of collections, which I talked about here earlier, we also get a lot of organizational records. And these are just a few examples of ones we got in this year. Other things that we get that aren't collections, but are useful for us for showing the different medias of information we get. This is an 8mm Kodak movie projector. For the longest time we didn't have any, and then one week we got 2 of them, and then a few months later we got this one here. So we always are thankful for this kind of stuff, because a lot of things, you can't put 8mm film into your DVD player anymore. You've got a way to show it. But I just received this last month my first collection that is on a Blu-ray disc. So we're we're in the enviable position to have to stay ahead of the curve technology-wise, but also kind of behind the curve as well, so we don't get too far ahead. And then this last thing I'm going to show you here is a film. The original film itself was donated in 1997 to the state archives, and these included 35, 16, 35mm and 16mm films down in the Platte, South Dakota area. Those were taken by Lawrence Cool. Most of them dated to the 1920s and 30s, and there's a few in the 60s. And along with the original film, they had gone and before they donated it to them, donated them to us, they played them on the wall and then taped them with their VHS player. And then they converted that to a DVD, and then they donated the DVD to us here this last year. So give me a second, and I will get this going, and then we'll show that film.
Right. Now I will talk about what we received in 2011 in the museum. Give a little overview of the museum first. I'm sure most of you guys have been through the Cultural Heritage Center Museum here. It's we're broken down into 3 galleries, 3 main galleries. The Oyate Tuwikuan Gallery, which is our Native American gallery. Proving Up, which covers first contact all the way through statehood. And then our Changing Times exhibit, which was the last permanent exhibit we put in 2005, which covers the South Dakota during the 20th century and into the present. This is our storage area here. Unfortunately, we don't have as much room as the State Archives does, but we are blessed with a very, very wonderful storage area. Right now we have roughly over 30,000 artifacts in the museum collection. At any given time, about 5.5% is on display. And that's pretty standard for most museums, at least our size. So that works out to about 1,600 artifacts that are on display. Last year we received 442 artifacts donated to the museum. It ranges from just about anything and everything related to South Dakota history. And I want to stress South Dakota history because, like the state archives, we are the only museum in the state to collect artifacts and history from all across South Dakota. We do have all 66 counties represented in our collection, which is important because some of our counties in the state, as you know, are pretty sparse and far away and remote, but they still have history that's important and real history, and it needs to be told and collected and saved. So that's one of the jobs we are happy to have the responsibility of having. This gal here is a centennial doll made in 1989 for the state centennial. It is made by Leon Thone from Bone Steel. And it was given to Jim Larson, who was very involved in the centennial celebrations that occurred throughout the state. And then he gave it to his daughter because the doll's name is Amy, and his daughter's name is Amy. Now we collect things both small and big. unlike the archives, most of our stuff doesn't fit nicely into square boxes. This is just an example of one of the more kind of whimsical pieces that we collect. It's a lighter from sometime after 1965, I can tell that because it's got the zip code on it. Zip codes didn't surface until 1965. Faith Prairie Oasis, that was its, or it still is, its nickname. I didn't know that until we got this piece, so, you know, unlike archives collections where it's the written word or photographs or videos, we have to pull the data from the artifacts and what they represent. And when we're lucky, or I guess not when we're lucky, but usually they come in, the artifacts come in with a really interesting story too. This one, the story wasn't that great, but it represents faith, and I mean, come on, this is just so much fun here. Guy taking a little siesta. This is a program that was given on board the USS South Dakota, the cruiser USS South Dakota, which we had the silver service for out in the lobby. And this was a play given on board that ship for the officers and the crew in 1910 when they were in port in Peru. This was a kind of a special artifact that we received, and actually it was a collection of 10 pieces, and it was the complete uniform of U.S. Marine Corps Corporal Clay Strombeck, and he was born in Sioux Falls and currently lives in Rapid City, but he served during the first Persian Gulf War, and we have such little amount of materials from that war and wars since then that we were just thrilled to get this piece. Like I said, it's a complete uniform, including the shoes, and what made me especially excited was we even got the socks that he wore with it. Obviously, these weren't his fatigues that he was wearing, you know, while, you know, on active day-to-day duty, but it was his dress uniform. And, you know, the fact that it's a Marine's uniform too, we tend to get more Army and Navy materials in, not so much with the Marines and Air Force, but this actually was a paperweight that a state representative and state senator in the 40s and 50s named L.M. Larson had on his desk in the State House. But he represented Perkins and Meade counties. And after his time in office, his daughter said, her granddaughter said that she always remembers him having it on his desk at his ranch near Ziona in Perkins County. So it's got a Pierre connection, and then it's got the Perkins County connection. And this was a new thing for our collection, and quite exciting. It's a playbill from the home theater in Tripp County. And going through, I was trying to figure out what the exact date of it was from. In the vast majority of the movies, in fact all of them except for Tarzan and the Leopard Woman, which I'm sure was just a fantastic movie, that was made in 1946, but all the others were made in 1950. Does that mean this is from 1950? Maybe not. My guess is late 1950, 1951. I'm guessing Tripp didn't get all the new titles right away. I'm guessing that a lot of places in South Dakota didn't get all the new titles right away, but it was just kind of fun looking through all these different movies and shorts that were coming through Tripp at the time. I didn't happen to see any real blockbusters or Oscar winners, but it's entertainment hitting the high plains, and theaters were quite important to the community life. Has anyone seen Tarzan and the Leopard Woman?
I can only imagine.
These are two separate items that came in the same collection. And I also want to point out, this is the museum's numbering system in case you're wondering what these numbers are. they don't mean anything to anybody but us, but I thought I'd put them on in case you saw something interesting and you wanted to talk to me more about it. You could reference the number. But, the item on the right is a coin for the Sioux Falls traction system, which was the trolley system in Sioux Falls that operated from 1907 to 1929. This was a token holder. It came a little bit after. This was from World War II, and it was put up by the Russell Miller Milling Company of Minneapolis, but used in the Sioux Falls area. And these were common throughout the country too, and these tokens would fit right down in and dispense, and it was kind of cool because they were promoting the saving of gasoline and while at the same time promoting their product. So like Matthew said, we also collect things from right now. And these are 2 stickers that we received from, well, that we collected while we were having an event here last year. They're from the Crow Peak Brewing Company in Spearfish. And that opened in March of 2007 and started distributing a few months later. Since then, another brewery has started distributing in small batches, but South Dakota used to have a really strong brewing industry back in the 1800s and early 1900s. And then Prohibition came along, and then also the big companies like Anheuser-Busch kind of put our breweries out of business. And we went through a really, really long time without having a single brewery that distributed in South Dakota until, I believe, the 1980s, and that was short-lived. And then another one popped up in the 90s, which was even shorter-lived. But Crow Peak, with the advent of microbrews that are swept the country, they seem to have a little bit of staying power, hopefully. Now we also started collecting sports cards of South Dakotans that are or have played in the major leagues in their respective sports. Terry Francona, up in the top left, he was born in Aberdeen. His father played for the Aberdeen Pheasants when they were a minor league affiliate to the Baltimore Orioles back in the 60s and early 70s. Floyd Bannister, he was actually born here in Pierre. He pitched for a number of years, had a pretty solid career in the major leagues, played for the Royals, White Sox, Indians. And then Jay Novacek, that's an early card. His famous days are from when he was a tight end for the Dallas Cowboys, but he was born in Martin, South Dakota. And then Dick Green, he wasn't born here, but he grew up and still lives in the Rapid City area, I think near Piedmont. And then John Sunfold, who was a guard and one of the best three-point shooters of all time, he was born in Sioux Falls. So our sports collection right now is probably one of the weakest areas of the overall collection. We are always looking to really add to that and strengthen it, because we really, unfortunately, don't have a whole lot. So if you have stuff in your closets, it might be interesting. Then we have a stenograph machine that was donated to us from a gentleman named Dick Christopher, and he bought this back in 1961 when he was going to the Minnesota School of Business to become a court reporter. He was from South Dakota, and then after he graduated, he came back and used this machine working for the 9th Circuit Court in Redfield. He worked there from 1963 to 1967, and then went off to work in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, and then came back to Hughes County in 1976 and was a court reporter for Hughes County from 76 to 88, and then for the federal court from 88 to 2005. One of the true strengths of our collection is our collection of political memorabilia. I can't even tell you how many buttons we have, but I know they're in the thousands. This one, and we're always adding more, because it's amazing how many of these things were made, and we try not to get too many duplicates, and these happen to be ones that weren't duplicates. This one for Senator McGovern, And for Vern Larson, when he was running for state auditor, one of the many times, he served from 1979 to 2002. I believe he's the longest running elected official in state history. One of my favorite collections that we've received in the last year was from a family out in Washington. And their great-grandfather, this gal's great-grandfather, had a store in Cherry Creek on the Cheyenne Reservation, Cheyenne Indian Reservation, from 1905 to 1942. Ira Sperling was the gentleman's name. And he took in pieces in trade for goods. And we were contacted and ultimately received. The collection was small, it only had 10 pieces, but there were some really outstanding pieces, like this teepee bag here. I'm guessing from the 1890s to 1910s. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes, but there are indicators in the beadwork and what materials were used. And then we have a little toy ball, beaded rawhide ball, and it's smaller than a baseball, but the beadwork on it is outstanding. I mean, outside of the salt and pepper design, which is that mishmash of different colors, the cross-like symbol is really unique. I haven't seen that on balls of that sort. One of the other pieces that came in was this beaded bonnet, and you can tell it's got some age to it. It's got trade cloth, both on the back and around the front, and the ties were actually made of a trade cloth-like material, beaded in the very quintessential patterns of the Dakota, with the geometric patterns and the spiderwork designs. When we received these two pairs of moccasins in a different collection, this actually what made up the collection. They're probably from the 1920s to the 1950s, right in that area. They're from the Rosebud Reservation. And unfortunately, a lot of times, in most cases, when it comes to older Native American collections, we just don't have the history of who used them, and in some cases where they were used, because things didn't tend to get written down. There's rare exceptions for that, of course, but so a lot of times we end up taking these knowing that they are Lakota and from some geographic region, and these just have all the telltale signs of Lakota footwear, not to mention it's from Rosebud, we do know that. Then we received this planetarium. It's a Trippancy planetarium, that was the brand, and it was used in rural Hughes County in a country schoolhouse by a teacher named Nona Green. But it ultimately made its way into the little cabin, the Pierce First Schoolhouse down in Steamboat Park, and it was there for about 25 years, up until this summer when it was threatened by the flood, and the East Pier Women's Club decided that it was time to bring it to the Heritage Center here. This dates from about 1910. At the end of the year, we received a couple signs from the old Terrace Park Dairy in Sioux Falls. Terrace Park started in 1948 by Al and Ozzie Schock, and they began making the internationally famous Nordic brand cottage cheese in the mid-50s. They later sold Terrace Park to Land O'Lakes. We collect business history, we collect town history, we collect personal history, we collect South Dakota history, human history, and this is a fantastic example of the business aspect. And the personal side, because they employ a lot of people. Sometimes we get pieces in that just really
Rock our world, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you. And this was one of them. In fact, the whole collection rocked our world, as Renette said. But this was the marquee piece in the collection. Obviously, it's a soapbox derby from Rapid City. It was used in 1941. The fellow that built it was a 15-year-old at the time. His name was Jack Enterman, and he was the 1941 city champion of Rapid City. He went on to race this car, All-American Soapbox Derby Championships in Akron, Ohio that year. He didn't win, but man, he got his name and face in the paper quite a bit, and thankfully they saved all the newspapers and sent him with. But it looks a little rough and a little beat up, but you know, for being 70 years old now and being in a garage for the last 70 years, it's not too bad, especially considering it's made out of newspaper and then covered with paint or a dope material. We are missing the windshield on that. Unfortunately, that didn't survive, it didn't come in. But like Renette said, it rocked our world, and we don't have a piece like this in our collection. Now we do, and we're very happy. We're just trying to figure out what we're going to do with it now. But along with that, with the soapbox, came his trophy from Rapid City. And we also got his jersey and his hat. We also got photos from when he was at Akron. And also photos of him building the soapbox derby car in his little garage. Practically a pro. And then that was the almost finished product, just with missing the sponsor's name on it. But you can see the windshield there. Matthew and I got a call in August. A family here in Pierre was having an estate sale and wanted to invite us down and take a look at things before they went ahead with the sale, in case there were some items that we wanted. Well, I couldn't pass up the teeth. These were, the family was the Whitney family, Dr. Wyman Whitney. He was a dentist here in Pierre. He went to school at the University of Minnesota. These were some of his training teeth. He used a little bit later on. And so we received his collection of papers. He was also in the Army, and he served in the occupation force after World War II in Europe, and then also at West Point before coming back to South Dakota. So we received in that collection his dental equipment and him and his wife's Army materials as well, from the dental corps, which is an area of our extensive World War II collection that we previously didn't have. So we got some chompers now, and a couple of really medieval-looking drills that would make you run. If I was sitting in a chair and I saw that drill, there was a hand-sized hole right outside the room, going through the wall. These are one of the items his wife collected in the Philippines when she was stationed over there. She got the Pacific Theater the day after VJ Day. She was an Army nurse, and she spent some time over there before going to West Point, where she met Dr. Whitney, and the rest is history. This is an example of rosemailing, but Norwegian folk painting. This is in the Vest Actor style. There's 5 different styles depending on the region of Norway. As we know, there's a lot of Norwegians in South Dakota, and we didn't have any rosemailing, so we got some this summer and happily added it. This particular piece was made by Shirley Odegaard at Brookings in 1978. This painting style, it really kind of died out at the end of the 19th century, and then had a renaissance in the 60s and 70s as people started becoming interested in their family's past. This piece was actually made by my grandmother, Avis Wilson of Brookings, and despite the name Wilson, she was actually of English descent, and her husband, my grandfather, was of Swedish descent, so not Norwegian, but a Norwegian art, and this is the Hallingdal style. This is an electrical panel that came from the Capitol. I haven't been able to track down if it was original to the Capitol or not. The donor believed it was installed in the 1930s, but it was removed in 1963 and was headed to the landfill, and the tractor that removed it saved it. It was actually displayed in different trade shows throughout the country, and the board was added in the 1980s, and they decided that it was time to come home to Pierre. If you're from Pierre, really if you're from South Dakota, couldn't have been helped but been affected by the flood in 2011 up and down the Missouri River, and we took it upon ourselves to really be active in collecting items from this event, knowing that how much interest and how important the 1952 flood has turned out to be in South Dakota history. So we collected materials such as t-shirts that were made for fundraising to help the victims, sandbagging equipment, even sandbaggers' clothing that he wore to fill sandbags. So we're trying to cover all aspects of the flood, and that included the aftermath of the protests that went on against the Corps of Engineers. These protest signs actually were used at the August 20th congressional hearing at the Dakota River Center. I'm going to show you a quick clip that we also collected.
It is June 5th, 2011. I am Curator of Collections Dan Brose with the South Dakota State Historical Society. I am at the Wahi Dam's Stilling Basin. I am on the western bank, looking east-northeast. They have just opened the gates and are working their way up to 130,000 cubic feet per second of a release. That's up 10,000 from yesterday. All the tubes appear to be open. The amount of water coming out now is just absolutely tremendous. As you can see, the turbulence is just ferocious.